In this video, I'll introduce you to the Atlas-3 project. The Ontario Breeding Bird Atlas is a partnership project of 5 partner organizations: Birds Canada, Ontario Field Ornithologists, the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry, Government of Ontario, Environment and Climate Change Canada, and Ontario Nature. It's a partnership, and there's relatively few staff involved. We only have 2 full-time staff. Lots of staff provide their time and expertise from the partner organizations, but it's a volunteer-driven project, and we rely on the help of thousands of volunteers collecting information about breeding birds across the province. This is our 3rd Breeding Bird Atlas. The first Atlas was a 5-year project, started in 1981, with field data collection going until 1985. The second Atlas was from 2001 to 2005, and we're now on Atlas-3, and we're into year 3 of Atlas-3 with data collection starting in 2021 and planning on going till 2025. There's a lot of goals that the Atlas has. It's a very ambitious project, huge project, really aiming to map the distribution and relative abundance of the province's breeding species of birds across the province. Now, the province is huge, so that's a very big task. And this time around, we are adding on to our existing goals from previous atlases by wanting to look at how things have changed between Atlas 1, Atlas 2, and now Atlas 3. And we really want to expand our coverage into the north. And then ultimately, the goal is to make sure all of this information that's collected and results from this giant project is available to conservationists, researchers, the general public, anybody who has an interest in birds and their status in the province. So the way the project works, we have the province divided into 47 regions. The regions are smaller in the south, where there's more volunteers and more people looking for birds. And then within each region, the province is further divided into 10 by 10 kilometer squares. So that's the basis of data collection, is the square level within each of those 10 by 10 kilometer squares. Our goal, we have coverage goals on a square basis. We're looking at, we want to get complete coverage in a square. So that means 20 hours of atlasing effort, birders going out and collecting information about the breeding birds during the peak breeding season. So that's May 24th to July 10th in Southern Ontario and June 1st to July 10th in Northern Ontario. We also are aiming to have 25 point counts completed in each square, and a point count is just a standardized survey that lasts 5 minutes, conducted by real expert birders who can identify everything by sight and by sound. We also have optional extra coverage through special surveys designed to survey things like owls, nightjars, and marsh birds that are typically missed by general surveys otherwise without targeted efforts. So we're aiming in Atlas 3 to get that complete coverage in 100% of the squares in Southern Ontario, in 5% of the squares in sort of the middle part, the lighter green there in the middle, and then 2% of the squares in the far north in that yellowish color. Atlas data are collected in checklists. Checklist is just a list of the birds you detect, whether by sight or by sound, along with the breeding evidence that they were exhibiting and a number of individuals. And then the checklist could be tied to a trail or a road if it's a traveling checklist. Could be a stationary count if you're just standing one place. So that's the basis of data collection. Very, very similar to eBird that most people are familiar with. The results are absolutely incredible. This is the barn swallow page from Atlas 2. So it's showing all sorts of information that we were able to gather. It shows the breeding evidence map, where the species was detected, and what level of breeding evidence was detected. It shows a relative abundance map. This is generated thanks to the 68,000 point counts that were collected in Atlas 2. So this shows how many individuals are in an area. And then we're also able to start looking at change, how things have changed in different parts of the province between Atlas 1 and Atlas 2. And of course, we'll be able to do that again for Atlas 3. And then there's also excellent text that interprets the results and gives information from an expert and information about the species biology and things like that. The atlas is also really important for documenting where rare species are and breeding colonies of colonial nesters are found. So in Atlas 2, there was more than 10,000 breeding sites of rare and colonial species documented. In Atlas 3, we're about tripling that every single year of Atlas data collection. So about 30,000 breeding locations of rare and colonial species per year are being collected right now. The applications of the data are absolutely massive. Hard to overstate how important these data are for conservation, especially. There's applications like for species at risk, very important for assessing the status of rare species and designating species with a COSEWIC status. That's the national COSEWIC is the national body that recommends statuses on rare species. It's very important for things like recovery strategies, action plans, critical habitat, all sorts of things related to species at risk. It's very important for other aspects of conservation planning, things like impact assessment, consultations on new development, and also for protected areas when we're looking at identifying new places and advising on protected areas management. And then, of course, lots of research uses these data for various research topics. So we're seeing lots of results already piling in. This is an example just showing where the species has been detected. This is common raven, so it's looping through Atlas 1, Atlas 2, and Atlas 3. So this is a species that we really saw expanding southwards into southern Ontario in Atlas 2, and the early results from Atlas 3 are showing that trend is already continuing. We have a similar trend for red-bellied woodpecker, except this species is expanding northwards onto the Canadian Shield. So in Atlas 2, we had our first detections of breeding evidence sort of north of Lake Ontario up to almost to Peterborough, and it's just continued to expand in those directions, well into the Peterborough area, into the Ottawa area, places like that. So really cool to see these results coming in after just a couple of years. But this is an amazing tool for us to be able to do that. So the Atlas, it's tons of fun. We have lots of activities. We have things like square bashes where we book some campsites and we get volunteers to come up and join Atlas staff and try to cover off an area that's not well covered otherwise. There's canoe trips that folks are doing as part of the Atlas, doing atlasing into the far north and just getting coverage in southern Ontario as well, and places closer to home. But it's a great excuse to go out birding in the summer months especially, and contributing to a great cause for conservation. So I hope that you'll consider joining the Atlas. If you're going to be out birding this year, it's not much more effort than what you're already doing. And if you are interested in joining, please be sure to check out our quick start guide.